That's carried with 14 votes to 7.
Right. Item 18. Delegated authority to make a submission to the Government Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Bill. This is reasonably exciting.
Through the chair, look, this is just requesting a delegation to formalise a submission on the Water Services Bill, so that's known as Bill 2. That's the one that's going to have the Auckland provisions. We just don't know how long we're going to have for a submission. We wanted to put this up in advance, but as per our normal process, we will ensure that you and local boards in Mana Whenua all have opportunity to input and contribute to the submission. That's the purpose of this report. And just to let you know that we will be releasing the confidential items and reports once the bill has been introduced into the House. Thanks.
Anybody want to say anything about this one?
It was a question.
Councillor Hills.
So the Te Mana o Te Wai provisions, is that, do we comment on that here? Is it, because I know that's coming through the RMA, but it is effectively removing our need to protect fresh water? Or is that through the RMA provisions we're discussing?
So that will be coming through the freshwater management provisions. I'm expecting, I haven't seen the bill yet, but I'm expecting that this will just be kind of around the setup of the new kind of water regime in New Zealand, and we'll have those Auckland specific provisions which will be predominantly around that interim economic regulation and that legislative prohibition. So I don't think it's going to be relevant, but when I see the bill I'll know.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Megan. Are we able to put in our submission ahead of time that we continue to support? Because we were already doing what the expectation is through that. So would we be saying we support the strengthened protections and expectations even if it may change later? Like,
Yes, may well. Again, I probably can't answer that till I see the provisions.
Okay, mover and a seconder for this. Me and Deputy Mayor. In favour? Contrary? Carried. Right. I'm just about out of the place. Not quite. Referred from the Audit and Risk meeting, the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Performance Report, which I've had to listen to twice already for my well-being. Is it possible that we could take this as read? I move the Deputy Mayor, seconded Baker, in favour of accepting that well-being, for our own mental well-being. That's good. The Enterprise Risk Update. Apparently part of this is secret. I think when you go into secret I'll be pretty grumpy if it's not bloody secret. But anyone to move and second this thing? Baker and have to be you. Deputy Mayor, all those in favour of whatever that was, in favour please say aye. Contrary, carried. Wonderful. The Joint Governance Working Party release of information. This is something that's good. We should be leasing information. So people who are worried about what we spent several hours with today can read what all the people spent many hours with under the Joint Governance Working Party. So if you do want to read something or other in order to back up the prejudices which you expressed before, you'll be able to do this now. So moved by Councillor Ferry.
Simpson Ferry.
Well, okay.
Simpson Ferry.
Simpson Ferry. Sounds like Manly Ferry. All those in favour, please say aye. Now we're going to exclude ourselves from the... What have I done?
22.
What's 22?
Summary of information.
Oh, summary of information. Walker usually likes to do this.
Baker Foley for that one.
This is the main stadium recommendations are going to be circulated. It seems bizarre that we're going to do this before we go into secrecy about the main stadia, but I don't know. I'd actually like to see the main stadia.
Who advised,
Open
Your
the-
Worship, in speaking to that, who advised that we needed to be in confidential?
Very good question.
I didn't get that, say that again.
Your Worship, I wasn't sure whether you're moving this item or whether you're moving the procedural motion. I wanted to speak to the procedural motion if we are speaking to it. My question is, on what advice are we going into confidential? Who was the officer that advised this?
If we're just actually going to summarise all the briefings that we're going to throw out to everybody.
Well, I'm happy to move the briefings.
And we'll get rid of that, then we'll take your question. So moved by Fletcher and seconded by Watson, by Foley. Baker Foley, right, all those in favour? Aye, carried. Now we're going to go into secrecy, and your question is a good point. I am not at all favour of the amount of secrecy this council goes into. You know, in fact, by the time we go into secrecy, I've lost the will to live by the end of the day, and so I oppose going to secrecy for any of these next things.
Your Worship, in the absence of being advised on whose recommendation this is, I wish to foreshadow that I will vote against this.
Pressed on. Why is this secret?
Hello. I understand that staff had seen the report, identified that there were reasons for confidentiality and that there were two reasons essentially. So the first one is around obligation of confidence, and that's because some of the information that you'll be discussing today is based on information that was put forward by the bidders who included confidential information in the information that they provided to the council. And to enable the discussion of that confidential information, it was considered appropriate to move into confidential for that purpose. In addition to that, the other reason given is negotiations, and some of that reasoning was around you may ultimately be in negotiations with groups around this, and enabling access to the information and discussion may result in you in some way being prejudiced in those future negotiations. Ultimately, it is a decision for elected members whether to move into confidential, but those are the reasons that were identified. And just based on those reasons, it's legally open for you to move into confidential, or obviously, as always, legally open for you to decide not to.
Thank you, Meredith.
Well, that's okay for the stadium thing, but the risk thing, why is that confidential? Emma.
Through you, Mr Chair. Mr Mayor, the reason for this part of the enterprise risk report being in confidential, and I would point out that a lot of the enterprise risk report was in the open agenda, and you've just passed a resolution to accept that. The reason that this part of that report is in confidential, it talks to our strategic risks, and having that discussed openly could exacerbate some of those risks.
For example, cyber security risks.
Sounds okay, but I can't imagine we're going to have a conversation about cyber security risks here at a sufficient level that anyone could spy on us. I mean, we're a group of old people who can hardly open a bloody computer. Yeah, well.
That might well be true, but this provides you an opportunity to ask Richard Jarrett questions about it if you so choose.
To have a mover and a seconder to go into secrecy. Councillor Turner, and followed by the Deputy Mayor, I think.
Turner Simpson.
Councillor Walker, you want to speak about secrecy?
Sure. I don't have any issue going into confidential over this cyber security related issue. But as far as the issue around the stadiums are concerned, and very familiar with the Stand and Read report, and if that is the report that we're considering, there is nothing that I can see in that report that would meet the test of any confidentiality. If there is, I'd like somebody to draw my attention to the particular part of that report. So that's a question I've got, because I don't think as I say, the report's got anything in it that's materially confidential.
I'm unable to answer that because I wasn't a member of the thing and never saw the stuff. So, Councillor Henderson, you might answer it, or the chief, or the.
Yeah, I might be able to assist, Your Worship. And I spoke with the councillor about this yesterday and was able to provide him with the evidence of at least one of the submitters having requested that their information be treated as confidential. So the terms of the EOI process that was signed off by the working group, and I wasn't a member of the working group and I wasn't present for those meetings, but I have reviewed the documents, made it very clear that if submitters submitted information and said that that information was confidential, then we would treat that information as confidential. And in some cases, submitters did do that. So that's the reason for treating some of the information as confidential. We could have a discussion in public, but it would mean we weren't able to refer to some of that information.
Okay, with respect then, is any of that information in the report? That is the information that the submitters asked to be confidential. None of that information is in the report. Is that correct?
The
the
contents of the report that are on the agenda today,
Correct.
Doesn't contain confidential information. And in fact, I understand all of that information has been released to the public already. So that's accessible on the agenda. The reason for the item being confidential is so that the confidential information can be discussed freely. And you'll know that one of the resolutions in that the item for discussion is, of course, that as soon as you've made that decision, the information is released publicly.
So just for clarity then, one, we have a report from Stand and Read that doesn't have anything in it that's actually confidential. Two, we do not have any of the confidential information supplied to us from the bidders in this agenda item. I think they're statements of fact, aren't they?
Councillor, I was referring to the agenda report, not the Stand and Read report. I think we may have...
Well, the agenda report doesn't have anything confidential in it either.
Yeah, that was what I was referring to, Councillor, when I was referring to the report.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, and through the Chief Executive, if there is no information that we have in the report that's confidential, and that is what we're discussing, we should be discussing it in open meeting, particularly when this is a matter that has substantial public interest. There has already been any amount of information that's been put out in the public realm to date, some of which is frankly incorrect. There's substantial public interest, and I would suggest that the measure of the weighting that you would put around having this matter in open is strongly in favour of it being an open rather than confidential. And if that were not the case, then by all means, if there happen to be some things that have to be dealt with in confidential, then they could be dealt with separately and we could move into confidential at that point. But I don't even know when that point might be.
Can I just clarify something? Because I think we might be talking a little bit at cross purposes. Yeah, so when you're referring, Mr. Hardy, to the agenda report not containing confidential information, but the Stanton Read report does or doesn't? Because obviously the Stanton Read report is an attachment to the agenda report. So does the Stanton Reid report include anything considered confidential? And then I have one more question after that.
I think we'd have to go through that in detail. And I think possibly Mike Reid from Stanton Reid is available, hoping to address the meeting. He was scheduled to do so, and he could probably address that better. But it does so. In some cases, the Stanton Reid report refers to information which one of the bidders said was confidential.
Okay.
I think so there might be some information that would be redacted. I think, in fact, probably the more likely outcome would be we would talk to that bidder and obtain their consent to the information being released publicly. So that would be the way I would be advising that you go about this. But there is some information which one of the bidders said was confidential. One of the bidders said their proposal was confidential, and that information is referred to in the Stanton Reid report.
Okay, so the agenda report would be fine, except that attached to it is the Stanton Reid report, which does include some confidential information. So my next question then is, so I'm assuming that when we have the conversation with Mike Reid about the Stanton Reid report, he is probably going to mention some of the confidential information that's in the Stanton Reid report, and we may be asking questions that he has to refer to that confidential information, maybe stuff that's not written down, but other stuff in his responses. And knowing how this group works, there's not really going to be an opportunity to go, oh, hang on, folks, that question's heading in a confidential direction, let's go into confidential. It's we kind of have to do all or nothing. Is that fair? I've got a little experience now. Yeah.
Your Worship, as a seconder, I believe in being as public as possible, but I suppose that you are actually asking my questions around this. So I reluctantly will second this to exclude the public based on our legal advice and based on one of the bidders requesting that the information remain confidential. I just want to be really clear. I would prefer to have it in open, but if we are told both from our legal team and by a submitter that they want the information to remain confidential, I'm happy for them to say.
Newman has a question.
Your Worship, I mean, the irony of this issue is that some of us have said nothing and kept this confidential and just read the media for updates. With respect to, which is what's happened actually, but with respect to the way forward, could I understand that following consideration of this item in confidential, that the report itself, which will need to have a redaction for one part of the Stanton Reid report, is then immediately released to the public? Because but for one part, I just can't see anything in this report that should be withheld. And that, okay, if we're going to go into confidential for a discussion, that we have that discussion, we resolve the matter, and that we then exit the confidential matter and to publish the confidential report, including with the redaction as well as the reasons for that redaction. Would that be a reasonable compromise? Because I just think that to just have a blanket block on everything just seems to be impractical. But that seems to be the best way forward with the media sitting here. Hello, Simon. And more online. Yes, they're all lining up, but you know, I'll read about it tomorrow, no doubt. Is that a way forward, Meredith, to ensure that we strike the right balance here, the principle of availability of information, but withholding that part for the reasons given, redacted as part of the
this is
reinstatement?
saying that the process is of high public interest but has been run as a confidential process given the confidential nature of information provided by respondents. stadium is put in, and it says later on, and as soon as we made a decision, we're going to bloody hand it all out. Well, I mean,
Yeah, but there is one part in there that will need to be redacted.
which is it?
Well, we can't,
You can't talk about it now.
If I can try
Well, I mean,
and
I
help.
read this doesn't look very secretive to me. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
The,
it doesn't even look like it's worth leaking, really. I mean, and it sounds as though that the board, and you've got to say that I'm one of the ones that hasn't been to any of the meetings, but I've been well informed through the newspaper about what's going on there anyhow. So some of you people must be talking to the media. We've got a motion on the floor. All those who want to go to secrecy, I'm going to vote against going to secrecy, but you can vote into secrecy. It's up to you guys. All those in favour who want to go into secrecy, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who don't want to go in, please say no.
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 Can we find out who was no, please?
All right, who joined me in the no's? Oh, Mr W Brown was a no. There was somebody else no's there? Who else?
I was a no.
And count, yes.
Pardon?
I was a no.
you have to declare.
Well, I'm declaring. Fletcher's a no.
A division has been called because it's unclear of what.
Somebody called a division.
Yeah.
Who did that? I don't know. That person's... The person who called the division is secret.
Hold on, just a sec. Can I just back the truck up for a bit? I know we're all tired. I just want to back the truck up for a bit. Because I think everyone wants to be as public as we can, but I just want to be sure that if you vote against going into confidential, you are voting against legal advice and you are voting against a request by one of the submitters not to discuss their bid in public. I just want to be really clear around that because I don't want to make this...
Speaking to the point of
Hold on,
order-
just a minute. Can
No,
I
well,
finish?
actually, you're
Excuse
intervening
me.
in the middle of a division, which you can't actually. But the matter that you're inquiring about can be discussed and explored in the confidential section if it gets that far. But you can't have this debate now, Desi, because the division's been called. I think
Councillors, the division has been called. There can be no debate and no points of order once the division has been called. You are voting to go into confidential. Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Bartley.
For.
Councillor Dalton.
For.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Hills.
for.
Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Deputy Mayor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Walker.
No.
Councillor Watson.
No.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Brown.
No.
That's carried 13 votes to 7.
Okay, we're in secrecy now. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Your Worship.
For
Can I
those
ask
of
a-
you who've waited all day long, you can take the
Procedural
sleeping bag and go home.
Can I ask a procedural question, please? Because I don't want the minutes of this meeting having been recorded that we weren't going, that we made a decision on confidentiality that wasn't based on certain things. So can there be a note, please, in the minutes for the reasoning for that?
The reasons for going into confidential?
For the reasons for going to confidential.
Yeah.
They're stated in the resolution.
It's stated in the resolution.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You have to
That's very
adjourn
good.
the meeting now, please.
I'm adjourning for 5 minutes for the representatives of the public to leave.